We're going to be finishing up our class on the Johannine Epistles. We're going to do something that is unheard of in Sunday school Bible classes, and that is getting through 2 books in one day. 2 chapters, 2 books. But luckily for us, it's going to be 2nd and 3rd John, 2 of the smallest books in the Bible. And so, as we've been talking about the Epistles of John, we've titled our class, Love and Obedience. Have you seen why that might be a good indication of John's epistle, especially 1 John? I mean, he is extremely concerned about our love for God and our love being displayed through obedience. And so this morning we're going to be in 2nd and 3rd John. We're going to read those books and then we're going to talk about those things. The lesson today is contending for the truth. We've talked about love and obedience, but one of the things we've also talked about throughout 1 John is the truth. Now in 2nd and 3rd John, these are going to be personal letters he's writing to, well, one to a congregation and one to an individual in the congregation that is there. And he's really concerned about them standing up for the truth, something that is also needed today. And so, 2nd John, we're going to be talking about what the truth is. And so, the first thing he talks about the truth is that the truth generates an exclusive Christian community. And so, let's go ahead and read the first 3 verses of 2nd John. The elder to the elect lady and her children, whom I love in the truth, not only I, but also all those who know the truth, because of the truth that abides in us and will be with us forever. Grace, mercy, and peace will be with us from God the Father and from Jesus Christ, the Father's Son, in truth and in love. Now, what ties you and I together? Love. What else ties us together? Love is what ties us together. 1 John chapter 5. What else? The truth, right? And so a lot has been asked, who's my brother? In fact, there's actually a book that was written probably, I don't know how, 20 years ago, 30 years ago in the church called Who's My Brother, right? Because the question is, who do you have fellowship with? Who don't you have fellowship with? You know, what congregation or which person have you disfellowshipped? Who do you not invite to the gospel meetings anymore? Now that question was getting asked a lot, and so there was a book that was written called Who's My Brother? Well, you have to ask yourself, what is going to be the parameters of who is my brother or sister? You know, what is going to be? Is it going to be whether I like them or not? Whether we like the same sports teams, whether they're a good person who is decent to their family and their friends. Like, what is going to be the qualifying factor as to whether or not we're going to be in fellowship with each other? And the first 3 verses of this book tells us it's got to be the truth, right? The truth of God's Word is the truth that determines whether or not we're in a right standing with God, and therefore if we're in a right standing with God's people. We don't get to disfellowship people. We recognize fellowship. When people decide to leave the fellowship they have with God, they leave the fellowship they have with me. If I choose to leave the fellowship that I have with God, if you're in fellowship with God, I have severed the fellowship that I have with you. And so the fellowship that we have is with God. And that leads us to have fellowship with each other. And all that is based upon the truth. Questions or comments on that? Right? Pretty easy, I guess. Pretty self-explanatory. And so John wanted his readers to appreciate the importance of guarding God's truth and practicing love for each other. It's interesting here in verse 3, if you realize.
On the lady.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Age-old question on the lady, the elect lady.
Oh, the elect lady?
Yeah, looking at the groups they're in, who do you think it is, the church or an individual?
I think it's a congregation. I think it is. I don't think it's the name of a lady. Korea, not the country, but the Greek word there sounds like Korea, but it's not Korea.
That's always a debate whenever you go to look at and study the book.
Yeah, people differ on whether or not they think the elect lady is a congregation or an individual person. Now, the 3rd John is going to be to an individual person, Gaius, but I think here in 2nd John, I think it's to a congregation. And we'll see at the end where it talks about the sisters and stuff. So, good question, though. One of the things that you see here in verse 3 is you have 3 things that are mentioned there: grace, mercy, and peace. What is grace? Unmerited favor. That's exactly right. Grace is when you get something you don't deserve. Right? How does that differ from mercy? Yeah. Billy Wayne said, you deserve it, but you don't receive it. Right? If I don't deserve something and I get it, like Christ, that's grace. If I deserve something, like hell, as a sinner, and don't get it, that's mercy. Right? What is peace? Yeah, contentment, serenity, this feeling of assurance. You get peace because you have grace and mercy, right? It's interesting that if you look at these things, you've got grace, which is totally dependent upon God. You've got mercy, which kind of commingles, and you've got the end result in our life, which is peace. You can't have the peace of God unless you first have the grace of God. And so it's interesting that here is one of the few verses that you find grace, mercy, and peace all together in one verse. In verse 3, I'm sorry. The second section of 2 John is that the truth demands a distinctively Christian ethic. So let's read verses 4 through 6. I rejoice greatly to find some of your children walking in the truth, just as we were commanded by the Father. And now I ask you, dear lady, not as though I am writing you a new commandment, but the one we have had from the beginning, that we love one another. And this is love, that we walk according to His commandments. This is the commandment, just as you have heard from the beginning, so that you should walk in it. Does it matter how we live our lives as Christians? Absolutely, right? We talked about last week about how the excuse "God knows my heart" is true, because the Bible tells us here in 1 John 5 or here in 2 John that God does know our hearts. If we love Him, what are we going to do? We're going to keep His commandments. If you don't keep His commandments, don't tell people you love God, because God says you don't. He doesn't accept that type of love because it's not love. And so we've got to be sure that we realize that the truth of God's Word demands that we live in a certain Christian way, that we've got to walk according to the truth. Peripateo, the Greek word for walk, is a Jewish idiom for like how you live. To walk in something means that that's your life. That encompasses who you are. I think it's interesting when you look at how Scripture all ties in together. That's what he says in 1 John chapter 1 verse 7. If you walk in the light as He is in the light, His blood continues to cleanse you from all sin. And then you get here and it says, if you love God, you're going to walk in the truth, right? You're going to walk in His commandments. And so that's a goal for all of us as Christians. It's something that is continuous, right? You don't just walk in the truth. Well, I got saved when I was 12. Well, have you been living like a heathen since then? Well, yeah. Well, it matters, right? I mean, salvation is not a one-time thing, right? It is a walk. You're walking with the Lord. You're walking with Christ. You're walking in the truth. And we've got to make sure that we're doing that. Questions or comments on that? Okay. And so then we get to the last section of 2 John, and that is the truth requires unceasing Christian vigilance. Let's read verses 7 through 11. For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh. Such a one is a deceiver and the Antichrist. Watch yourselves that you may not lose what we have worked for, but that you win a full reward. Everyone who goes on ahead and does not abide in the teaching of Christ does not remain in God. Whoever abides in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your house or give him any greeting. For whoever greets him takes part in his wicked works. And we'll just go ahead and finish it out. Though I have much to write about you, I would rather not use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to come to you and talk face to face so that our joy may be complete. The children of your elect sister greet you. And so, talking about verses 7 through 11, if the truth is going to be what is the glue that holds us together in fellowship, should the truth be important to us? Yeah. Should we contend or fight for the truth? Should we stick up for the truth? Absolutely. And verses 7 through 11, what does he tell these Christians here concerning the truth? What does he say? Yeah. If you're not for me, you're against me, right? We understand that. It's a biblical concept. Jesus said that himself. And so if you're not for the truth, you're against the truth, right? And so we have to be careful who we're going to give our stamp of approval on. And that's what he's talking about here. And he's going to talk about that again in 3 John. Is it important that we realize what people are teaching or saying before we put our stamp of approval on them? Absolutely, right? Because if somebody is teaching error and we support that, then what are we doing? We're agreeing with them, right? We're taking part in that action. I was talking to someone one time, and they were talking about, it's been probably 10 years ago. It was about homosexuality, which is a sin just like everything else in the Bible is a sin. And it was during the time of the big debates about legalization of homosexual marriage, and all those things were taking place in our culture. And you guys remember that. And he was talking, he said, it doesn't bother me. He said, I don't care what anybody does. If they get married, that's fine. And I was trying to tell him about Romans chapter 1, verse 32, which I think ties into what John is saying here. If you read Romans chapter 1, verse 32, it talks about the different sins that are taking place against God, against His children. One of those listed as homosexuality along with others. But it says that not only they deserve death, talking about eternal damnation, but those who support it, those who agree with it. And so we have to be careful, especially when it comes to the truth, where we're putting our stamp of approval. Has someone ever asked you to be a resource for them, like in a job interview? And you were like, oh man, in your head, not out loud. You ever done that? Yeah, because you know that your stamp of approval is supposed to mean something, right? It's a mark of your character. But we live in a day and age, religiously speaking, where people just give a stamp of approval to everybody. Like, do you believe in Jesus? Yes. They're good. They're Christians. They're believers. Now, we don't agree on anything else, but they're okay with me. Look at 2 John. I mean, let's take a step back here. We've got to be sure that we know what people are teaching and what they believe before you just throw out a blanket statement like that saying, well, we have fellowship. Anyone else have a question or comment? Brother Rick, you have something to say? No? Okay. You look like it. You look like you're ready to pounce.
Well, talking about homosexuality, we all know that culture has been spoon-feeding the public on that for a number of years, and it's going to continue. I mean, it's to the point now where more and more people are coming out and open, acknowledging that they are gay or whatever, and it has become in this country something that's acceptable now.
Yeah.
But regardless of how acceptable it might be to the culture, or to anybody around us, whether it's our friend or co-worker or whatever, we don't get our credibility on something from an individual. We get it from what the Word of God says. And if it says that homosexual is sin, I don't care how many people. You can have Hillary Clinton or Obama flip-flopping, as long as I get your vote, I'm okay with gay people. And I'm okay with them too. We're a hate to sin, not the sinner.
Right.
So the fact that you got someone that's homosexual doesn't mean that they should be an outcast with you altogether. How else are they going to come to know Christ if they don't in some way come in contact with someone that knows Christ?
Right.
So like eating the flu. You have to first come in contact with someone that has the flu, get the flu. Well, how is that homosexual going to come to know Christ if all Christians throughout the world just totally ignore them 100%?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Jesus hated the sin. I'm not going to say another. It's going to take someone that knows Christ to be able to promote that and get that individual to change their mind and heart. So, I'm sick of how the media, I'm sick of how Hollywood and other people are portraying and trying to force that stuff down our throats. And as it's turned out, because of that, guess who the bad guy is?
We are. We ain't Christians. Yeah.
The right is the bad guy.
Yeah.
The left is good.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, it's creating issues for Christians today. It's gone that far.
Yeah.
That if you as a Christian say that homosexuality is wrong, then, you're worse of an outcast to them than a homosexual might be for us.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And it gets back to why it's important to contend for the truth. Because when we don't contend for the truth and everything's okay, you lose your distinctiveness. I mean, look at our culture. It's not just homosexuality, right? 1920s and 30s, it was alcohol. 1950s and 60s, it was foul language. 1960s, 70s, early 80s, it was divorce. I mean, 1990s and 2000s, it's homosexuality. I mean, it's just, the homosexuality bubble is not an anomaly, right? It's just our culture is just trying to push sin. And it gets one victory and it goes something else, which is why we have to stand for the truth, right? The same is taking place in religious circles. If we don't stand for the truth, then you lose your distinctiveness. And you lose your ability for people to say, well, they're different. Why are they different? And so we have to be sure that we stand up and we fight for the truth. And so, because if we live in this ecumenical society where everybody who believes in Jesus is a Christian, like the world tells us, that does nobody any good, because we're just living in a false state of assurance that's one day going to be awakened.
I think if members of the church today go out and say have a campaign, somebody gave $1 billion to go out and promote Christ and to try to help people understand more about the church, about the Lord's church. Right now, we're less than 1/2 to 1% membership of the Church of Christ in the entire United States. Mm-hmm. That's about 1,367,000 people or so. Mm-hmm. That's nothing. That's the view that Matthew is talking about in Matthew 7. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's where the view comes from, and you can look at the numbers there. But I'm telling you, if we were to go out and have a huge campaign about the Church of Christ, you know who the next outcast will be?
Us? Yeah.
Denominationalism, Catholicism, all of those people would be up in arms, and we would be worse than
mud.
life out there.
Yeah. Which is comforting when you think about it, because Jesus told the apostles that if the world hates you, it hated me, right? And so if we're winning popularity contests.
But isn't that true? What would happen to us? We would be persecuted. You'd see persecution all of a sudden.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and I think you're right. I think you're right about that. So, good comment.
About these campaigns that run, they go in ever so slightly to begin with and put more fuel on their fire as they advance.
Yeah. Well,
We're working on the homosexual campaign way back in the 60s and 70s. But they weren't quite so vocal about it, nor at the front in our faces like they are now.
yeah. We've got to stand for the truth, but we've got to stand for it in a way that is in a Christian manner, right? Kill 'em with kindness. I was always told growing up. I saw a video on Facebook. Some of you may have seen that, about a young lady who went to a Bible study, and she was a lesbian, living in a homosexual lifestyle. And through that Bible study, she changed her lifestyle. If you see that video floating around Facebook, it's really, really good, 3-4 minute watch. But she said that she went in that Bible study ready for an argument. She knew, that they were going to not agree with her lifestyle. And so she said she went there hoping they would bring it up on the very, very beginning, that there'd be a confrontation, and it would give her some sort of like vindication for her anti-biblical stance. And she talked about how they were very kind, very calm, very Christian-like, diffused the situation, didn't bring it up from the get-go, talked about other things. And so, yeah, we've got a hard message to sell from the world's standpoint, but if we do it in the right way, God's promise, His Word will see results. So, yeah. Yes?
Do you think John is talking to us in the church in this particular letter?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think so too. I mean, he's talking to a congregation here. That's what we are, right? And so we have to stand for the truth. We've got to stand for the truth in this congregation, in our families, in our communities, because the truth is under attack every day. I mean, every day. I mean, it's not just today with homosexuality. It's not just the 70s with divorce and remarriage. The truth has always been under attack. It's always going to be under attack because that's how Satan works. The question is, how diligent are you going to be in fighting for the truth? How diligent are you going to be making sure that there's someone standing up for the right and that person's you? And so that's a call that all of us have to answer because it's not easy. It's going to lose you some friends probably. It's going to lose you some popularity contests, but it'll gain you heaven as a reward. So you just got to ask yourself, which one do you want? Because you can't have both. Charles?
I think about the truth of us being Christians. We got an election here coming up here in person, and we got to look at the person and see what they represent. We have a person running for governor that's a member of the church. We have a person running for state's national senator, and she's a member of the church.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, you need to go and look at those and see if they're influencing others.
Yeah.
I think some of them are.
Yeah, I think so. We live in such a time of, I'm not sure what's the right adjective to describe it, but one of the good things about living in a time is this: the truth stands out. It's different. Most won't like it. Some will be attracted to it because they can look around and say, you know what, this just doesn't seem right. Like, this just doesn't seem like this is the way it ought to be. And so, yeah, I think you're right. I think we should use our influence in any way that we can, whether it's politically, relationally. And so I think that we should do that too. Moving on, as time is slipping away, let's go to 3 John. 3 John is going to talk about upholding the truth. So once again, an emphasis here on being sure that we hold up the truth. Interestingly, 3 John is the only New Testament book that does not mention Jesus by name. Instead, it uses the name. It doesn't use the name Jesus. It just uses the term, the name. That's also used in the New Testament to refer to Jesus in Romans 1:5 and also in 1 John 2, verse 12. And so he talks about upholding the truth. And I apologize for the slide there, but that says supporting the truth. Let's read verses 1 through 8. The elder to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in the truth. Beloved, I pray that all might go well with you and that you might be in good health as it goes well with your soul. For I rejoiced greatly when the brothers came and testified to your truth, as indeed you are walking in the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. Beloved, it is a faithful thing you do in all your efforts for these brothers, strangers as they are, who testified of your love before the church. You do well to send them on their journey in a manner worthy of God, for they have gone out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore, we ought to support people like these, that we may be fellow workers for the truth. In the early church, Gaius is mentioned several times in the New Testament. It is most likely not this Gaius. There's a name mentioned in Gaius in Acts chapter 19 and 20, also Romans 16 and 1 Corinthians 1. This most likely is not this Gaius. This is probably a Gaius living in Asia Minor, and the other Gaiuses were not. But Gaius had been supporting missionary preachers. In the early days of the church, you had missionaries who would go around and they would preach, these travelers. They wouldn't take any money from Gentiles. They didn't have bake sales. That was a joke. Nobody? Nobody caught that? Okay. They didn't solicit or accept funds from unbelievers. Ezra 8:22, prophets didn't accept funds from non-Israelites, from pagans. Matthew 10, 2 Corinthians 12, 1 Thessalonians 2:9. They did not accept money from unbelievers. And so they relied on the generosity of those inside the church to raise their funds and be sure that they were taken care of as they went around preaching the gospel. Well, when they get to this congregation, Gaius is there, and Gaius opens up his home to these individuals. He's supporting them with lodging, with food, with his time and his care. And John is writing this to say, you're doing a great job by you taking care of these individuals for Christ, because they've gone out because of the name. You are doing a service for Christ himself. Just like when you give your funds on the first day of the week so that money can be used for the preaching of the gospel. It can be used to help those who are in need. It can help those who are preaching the gospel around the world. You are doing that as a service first and foremost to God. And that's the example of Gaius that he gives us. But we're also told in verses 7 through 8 to be careful who we accept money from. Notice they didn't accept any money from unbelievers, right? And be careful who you give money to. Because who you give money to is a stamp of your approval, right? That we may be fellow workers for the truth. Now, Gaius is a fellow worker of the truth because he's giving money to the truth. Now, if you give money to error, who are you a fellow worker of? Error. Okay? But it makes people mad this morning because that's what I do. Salvation Army is a false church. When you give money in the bales of Walmart, you're supporting a false church that teaches a false doctrine that tells people how to get to heaven wrongly, not even close to the Bible. Think about that. Next time you hear the ringer by Walmart, right? If you didn't know, I forgive you. God will forgive you. If you do know, I'm going to be upset. I think God is too.
How do you deal with someone like the slide?
That's tough, man.
You know, every Christmas season, you see all those advertisements all day long.
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough. And that's one of the best things. Brittany's grandfather, he gets asked all the time, and he says, "I give money to the Hinesville Church of Christ. If you'd like to ask him for funds, the elder's number is whatever, you know." And he just tells people. He says, "I give my giving to the church, and wherever the church decides to send it is good enough with me." It's pretty good. It's a pretty good way to use it.
You know, I've got minors as one of our superintendents, and I know the degree talk about that.
Yeah.
About what they have to go through to get up to a high position in that organization. And I'm telling you, some stuff it's almost unfortunate they're linked with something like St. Jude, the hospital that helps the children.
Yeah.
So
It's, like I said, it's tough. But there are other places you can give. Like, as far as I know, I don't think Vandy's Children's Hospital is tied with any religious organization. Well, I mean, you know, any college, I guess, is a liberal. Yeah. But I don't know if the Children's Hospital is connected, but if it is, I mean, I don't know. I'm glad we're having these discussions, you see? We're all learning something.
You know, it's like you go to a hospital, I mean, you're not going to the hospital for religious instruction, you're going to the hospital for treatment.
Yeah, no, if you can have heart surgery at Baptist, I'm not going to be like, I don't know, man. I'm not coming to see you. No. But no, I don't think so. But I think if we're like looking to give to like charitable organizations and like making a donation, I think we have to be careful about that.
I believe it's okay to give like thank you for the cancer thing.
Give it for religion,
Yeah.
for suffering.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's true, and that's a debate to have. Like the town we used to live, there was a coat drive, or not a coat drive. Well, it was like consignment. It was a consignment store, right? It was like Goodwill, but it was for the local Methodist church. And Brittany and I couldn't take our stuff there. And the high school would have like a shoe and a coat drive. Couldn't take our stuff there because they were going to take it to it's like a Goodwill, but it wasn't a Goodwill run by the local Methodist church. They were going to give it away or sell it at cheap discounted prices. But, you know, part of that went to their treasury at the Methodist church. Money's not going to the Methodist church, you know, and because I know what they teach, and it's not the truth. And so for my own convictions, I could not do that. Yeah, to the school system. Oh, yeah, that's great. I think that's what the church is supposed to do. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think we should be generous and give things. I just think we need to be careful from the passage here and others that if you give money to something, you're putting your approval to something. So just do some research and be sure you know what you're doing before you write somebody a check. But Charles?
We used to have what we call United Way in Nashville. We had it, and they have 60 different things that you get it. And I was a coordinator for my school a few times. And I said, well, you don't use that. And I say, well, designate it.
Yeah.
But they give a lot of liberal causes to, I mean,
Yeah. And sometimes the best thing is find somebody in need and give it to them. Like just cut the middleman out. Instead of giving money United Way, go buy some sleeping bags and hand out to the homeless in the middle of town. Just.
Every time you donate to a big corporation like this one, only a very small percentage of your money,
Yeah.
when it goes to feed or clothes, a lot of that goes to other places.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I'd rather feed somebody than put money in somebody's pocket.
Yeah.
And do a little research to find out that the guy that owns Goodwill is doing this going all over the place, basically all over here. I realize pretty quick where most of that's going.
Yeah.
Well, let's open the big can.
Really? You wait?
Tax dollars to go toward the government that funds all this other. So I quit paying taxes, right?
Danny, you're trying to get both of us in trouble. Jesus did say, give to Caesar, that which is Caesar's.
Yeah.
I've been told there's no actual law that says you have to pay taxes. Just can't lie on your taxes. But I pay mine. I don't know.
The 16th Amendment makes a difference.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I just write the check whatever the accountant tells me to. But no, but at the same time, when Jesus told, render to Caesar's what Caesar's, give to God's what is God's, the Roman government was extremely wicked. And so, it kind of gives us and so yeah, most of them need a little help. Causing division, okay? He goes on the opposite way. Gaius is someone that we should follow the example of because he's a good guy. He's got a good heart. He's trying to help the truth. Then you've got a guy over here who's an awful guy. And let's just read that real quick as time permits. I've written something to the church, but Diotrephes, who likes to put himself first, does not acknowledge our authority. So if I come, I'll bring up what he is doing, talking wickedness and nonsense against us. And not content with that, he refuses to welcome the brothers and also stops those who want to help and put them out of the church. Beloved, do not imitate evil, but imitate good. Whoever does good is from God. Whoever does evil is not from God. Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone, and the truth itself. We also add our testimony, and you know that our testimony is true. The opposite side is somebody like Diotrephes, who's a watchdog in the church. We can't go around and just have fellowship with everybody. But on the opposite side of the coin that is just as bad as someone like Diotrephes. You ever know anybody in the church who hated everybody? Like everybody was a false teacher? Like everybody? That's Diotrephes here. And John gets on to him. And so there's two sides to the coin. So we can't be loosey-goosey and just, everybody's okay, we're all going to heaven together. It's not biblical. But we can't be like Diotrephes either, who's got people who are preaching the gospel, and he's like, I don't like that person, so I'm just going to say they're a false teacher and make their life miserable. Like, you can't do that. There's got to be an example. So what are the conclusions from 2 John? Congregations can cooperate in shared successes and in struggles. Christians are accountable for how we live and what we teach. Be careful in your associations with those who speak falsely about Christ. Don't help the enemy. 3 John, the conclusion is, there are good examples like Demetrius and bad examples like Diotrephes. Be careful who you follow, and also be careful of what example you're setting. Brotherly love is a beautiful thing, and also hospitality is an essential element of our faith. We're supposed to be people who open our hearts, our homes, and even our checkbooks to the Lord and His cause. We're out of time, and so thank you so much for your attendance. Next week we'll begin our new class on Bible translations and how we got the Bible. And if you don't mind, let's go ahead and end with a prayer. Dear God, we're so thankful for your word and for the example that it gives. We're so thankful for men like Gaius and Demetrius who've been faithful in your church since the day it was established. And help us to be faithful members of this church, to fight for the truth, to contend for the truth, and to live in such a way that other people would like to know what the truth is. Please be with us and watch over us and help us to grow. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.